Sharon's prophecy is now the facts on the ground. There are 4 million Palestinians, 2.5 million in the West Bank, 1.5 in Gaza, but there are also now 450,000 plus Israeli settlers who are living in the West Side, in the West Bank. Excuse me, West Side is where I spent some time living. They are called settlements, but they have all of the earmarks of any other city. They have schools, industry, police, libraries, retail trade, hospitals. There are 250,000 settlers inside East Jerusalem alone. These settlements are all strategic. Some of them are military, some of them are economic. The largest one, named Ariel, sits directly on top of the largest aquifer in Palestine, its source of water. Israeli soldiers are everywhere now in the West Bank. They are at the gates to the old city. They are at the Wailing Wall. The Wailing Wall looks like an armed camp. Tourists have to pass through metal detectors in bulletproof plexiglass cages to approach it. Palestinians themselves increasingly live in the West Bank in conditions resembling those from the Middle Ages, when short distances were overwhelming. This is because they now live in physically isolated cantons, and they are physically isolated by a number of different Israeli-created barriers. The separation wall, that's the Israeli name for it, separation wall, is a 24-foot high concrete wall topped with barbed wire that winds like a snake through the West Bank. 80% of this wall does not touch the green line. In other words, it is inside the West Bank and intended to become the permanent facts on the ground, redefining the boundary of the West Bank. The Israelis dump their trash over it onto the Palestinian side, leaving disposal to the Palestinians. Along highly traveled areas, however, where it is visible from the Israeli side, it is bermed up behind landscaping with the barbed wire visible only from the Palestinian side, so that it appears to be an innocuous 4-foot-high landscaping feature. This wall separates towns from their orchards and farms, depriving them of their only livelihood. It separates children from their schools, forcing them to walk long miles to get to school that is only a few blocks away. It divides towns and it divides families. There are, in addition to the separation wall, there are checkpoints, 660 of them, on Palestinian roads. These make trips that should be no longer than 20 minutes, as long as 4 or 5 hours, or 10 hours, or never. You may wait at a checkpoint overnight to get by on a completely arbitrary and unpredictable basis. Everyone is held at the checkpoint, including surgeons trying to reach emergency cases at the hospital. These checkpoints very effectively sabotage and block economic trade and travel. And thirdly, there are settler-only roads that surround the settlements and travel and allow people to travel from the settlements to Tel Aviv, for example, or other places in Israel. There's one that goes from Ariel to Tel Aviv, and it takes 20 minutes. It allows people to commute easily from Ariel, to live in Ariel, where they can get tax breaks for living there, and to work daily in Tel Aviv. And there is nothing along that road at all to indicate to those who choose to believe what they see and nothing else, that they are at any time outside of Israel. Is a two-state solution still possible? Well, I think that answer boils down to the question of whether Israel is going to be willing to go to war against its own citizens who are living in the ideological settlements in the West Bank, who have made it very clear that they intend to fight rather than live peaceably. That's a very uncomfortable, painful prospect, as you can imagine, for Israel. Is a one-state solution possible? Well, for the answer to that question, I think the first thing we need to do is to look at how Israel treats the Palestinians, who are already separated from them by the separation wall and the Green Line, and think, what would Israel do if there were only a single state? It's a very depressing subject. But, and these photos, by the way, are emotionally wrenching, especially for people who have actually been to Palestine, who were born there, who have seen what it was like, as I did 23 years ago. It's a completely unrecognizable place. But it is good to keep in mind that we are making some headway. For example, last year the word Nakba, which I told you about a little while ago, was actually printed and broadly explained in US newspapers for the first time, the 60th anniversary of the Nakba. The internet is causing a sea change because while there is broad opposition to what Israel is doing in Europe, where there is broad information about what's happening in the public media, there is self-censorship here in the United States, which is still very much alive and well, and that prevents most people from really having much understanding at all of what is going on. But if you go online, you can easily find out. And those people in our population who do go online, that is, those of you who are out here who are students in universities and high school, are going online and are finding out what's really happening. And so things are slowly changing. That is, public perception is changing. And my organizations believe that change will only come in this way, by changing public perception, which is why I'm here today to show you what I saw in the West Bank. So let's do that right now.